For many composers, their lifelong musical pursuit is trying to write that perfect melody. So in this video, I want to go over my 4 favourite tips for crafting an effective and memorable melody, including starting with a short motive, which you can then develop, making sure to include a mixture of steps and leaps, giving your melody an overall arc or contour, including a climax or focal point, and limiting the overall range. Alright, so tip number 1, which is to start with a short motive, which you then develop. Most strong melodies start with a small simple fragment of an idea or building block called a motive, which can help to focus the listener's attention by providing a clear and easily digestible pattern. So a motive is typically 1 or 2 bars long and can contain an initial idea of pitches combined with a strong rhythmic identity. Most successful melodies then take a motive and, through a careful balance of repetition and development, take the listener on a musical journey from point A to B, forming a complete melody. So although the aim is to create, say, an 8-bar melody, let's start by coming up with a 2-bar motive first. Here is one I've written in the key of D major, with a D major and then A major chord for the initial harmonic progression. In my own composing workflow, I almost always will come up with a chord progression first, before then adding a melody. I want to make sure the motive or building block has a strong yet relatively simple rhythmic idea. So I've opted for these 2 eighth notes as a lead-in or pickup into a dotted quarter note. Next I have 3 more eighth notes before a half note for the beginning of the second full bar. Pitches wise, for the 5 notes that fall under the D and A major chords, 4 of the notes belong to each respective chord. Try to think of your motives as musical questions and then answers. This first hearing of the motive poses a musical question. It feels like there is an expectation that more is coming, which we are now going to answer with the next 2 bars. One of the easiest ways of repeating a motive, yet achieving a fine balance between repetition and variation, is to keep the rhythm the same or extremely similar while changing the pitches. So here for the next 2 bars, or second building block, you can see the rhythm is exactly the same, including the 2 pickup notes. I've changed the pitches and general melodic shape though. These 2 collectively form the first phrase of the melody. For the second half of this 8-bar melody, or third building block, I'm going to again start with a similar rhythm to that of the first motive. For some variation, I've altered the rhythm during the second bar though. Crafting a melody is a fine balance between using repetition and development. Too much repetition of any component of the original motive may make the music start to sound dull or boring. To complete the 8-bar melody, I feel more rhythmic variation is needed. So I've tried repeating the new rhythm that's used in the third block again to help bring the melody to a close during this 4th and final block. So you can see that this 8-bar melody is built firstly by establishing a clear 2-bar motive, before then repeating the motive, mostly keeping the rhythm the same, but changing the pitches to provide the main source of variation. Here's the whole melody. The next tip is to try to include a mixture of movement by both steps and leaps in your melodies. Moving by step is where consecutive notes are neighbouring pitches, or scale degrees. So it could be from a B to C, or an E down to D. Moving between pitches by steps makes it easier for the listener to digest and helps to add a sense of familiarity to your melody. Moving by leap, on the other hand, is where there is a jump between consecutive notes of an interval of a third or more. Common leaps include intervals of, say, a 4th, 5th or 6th, and they can of course be in both an ascending or descending order. Leaps help to give your melody more uniqueness and character, and to some extent, some unpredictability. Try to avoid leaps of intervals over an octave. As well as being harder to sing, these typically would diminish a feeling of cohesion in your melody. A melody with lots of stepwise movement can start to sound bland and boring, while lots of consecutive leaps can sound chaotic. So you want to achieve a healthy balance between both. So you can see here I've included both a mixture of movement by steps, shown in green, and movement by leaps, shown in red. Ultimately, you want your melody to ideally take your listener on a musical journey, going from point A to point B. A melody which doesn't really travel anywhere could feel stagnant or boring. You always want your melody to go somewhere, starting from one place, going on a journey and then eventually coming back home. You'll also want your melody to have a clear single focal point or climax, a highest pitch, which is typically only reached once. By hitting this highest pitch once, it will allow it to have more emotional impact and have the most dramatic effect. You'll see that most melodies have the climax during the second half of a melody. An exception to this though is Somewhere Over the Rainbow, where the highest pitch is reached during the first phrase. Most melodies have a sense of arc, although potentially a little lopsided, rising up gradually to the highest point during the second half, before then quickly coming back down for the ending. Here in this melody, my musical climax occurs at the start of bar 6, with the top A. Aim to keep the lowest and highest notes of your melody to within an octave, plus 3 or 4 notes. If the distance between the highest and lowest notes is too great, the melody could potentially feel like it's wandering too much, without any clear sense of direction. If on the other hand the range is too small, it might feel like it hasn't been on a distinct enough journey. Melodies with a large range also run the risk of being hard to sing, which you should be able to do with a strong tune. So in this melody, the lowest pitch is a middle C, with the highest pitch a D an octave plus 1 note, or a ninth above, at the beginning of bar 7. So these tips are obviously guidelines and not strict rules. You don't have to follow them exactly for your own melody. If something sounds right to your ears, then it is right. Writing an effective melody can be very challenging at first. I love Ed Sheeran's philosophy on songwriting though. He compares it to the water in a dirty tap. When you first switch on a dirty tap, the water that comes out first will be dirty. That's your bad melodies. Eventually, after a while though, the water will start to gradually get cleaner before clean water is flowing freely. So with songs, he says you're going to write weaker songs or melodies at the beginning. The more and more you write though, the better they will get. I also love a quote from the biography of Andrew Lloyd Webber. When playing his father, who was also a composer, the melody from the song Memory, apparently his father simply replied, "It sounds like $1 million." So in this video, I obviously talked about writing a melody with a chord progression in place first. Make sure to check out these 2 videos where I show different chord progressions that you can find in cinematic music. By having a harmonic framework in place, it will help inform you of the notes to use in your melody, particularly in the initial motive. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you hopefully in the next video. Bye bye.